Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Ageless Athlete Podcast. This is your host, Kush Khandelwal, and bringing you a fresh episode where today we make a slight departure from our typical focus on standout athletes. This time we are sitting down with a coach and physiotherapist who has helped countless everyday athletes extend their longevity in sport and life. Andy McVittie is a physiotherapist, coach, and lifelong climbers who works with outdoor enthusiasts of all ages, from seasoned climbers to cyclists, hikers, paddles, and everyday movers over 40 who want to stay active for life. But don't worry, this episode isn't just for climbers. In fact, we focus on the bigger picture, on why aging doesn't have to mean decline and what the science actually says. Then we talk about how to overcome common aches and pains that hold people back in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. We talk about common mistakes athletes, including myself, make as we age and how to avoid shrinking one's world unnecessarily. And then finally, we also speak about how to stay strong, mobile, and confident in your body, whether you are training for big adventures or simply want to move better in daily life. Andy is 49 himself, and we explore his personal philosophy as a movement optimist, challenging the outdated myths about wear and tear, arthritis, tendon degeneration, and other issues that too often sideline aging athletes. And here's the good news, this is just part one. We will bring Andy back for a deeper dive where we will get tactical advice on more specific issues. So, if you are someone who's committed to staying active and injury free as the years go by, you will not want to miss what's coming next. Friends, those of us who are new to the podcast and those of us who are continuing to join every week, I thank you so much for your time. Time is our most precious commodity. So thank you for staying with the Ageless Athlete journey. I also thought to let you know that I have started this weekly or so newsletter where we share updates on upcoming podcast episodes, as well as some other tips, strategies, stories for us to build over as part of this community. If you want to get this newsletter, please subscribe. You can go to agelessathlete.co or you can just find the link on the show notes. I promise no spam ever. Okay, so now let's jump into this insightful conversation with Andy.
Some sort of cereal, wholemeal, whole grain rather cereal, like fruit and fibre would be the sort of the name, that we have over here, with some oat milk. I was putting protein powder and things in, but the taste and the texture was never that great for me. So recently changed to experimenting with TVP, textured vegetable protein. But you know, when you buy a protein bar, and it's got those crunchy bits in it.
I know TVP. Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
right. Okay.
Yep.
So dried, but then sprinkled on top of the cereal, so it's crunchy, it's nice, and with some berries and fruit and things like that in.
That's an interesting use of TVP. I have used TVP to add, let's say, bulk and protein to pasta, even to soups.
Yeah, no,
I never thought
normally,
that I would add that to, normally what I consider, like, let's say, a slightly sweeter type of food, which is a cereal bowl.
Well, it was my partner Rachel. It was her idea. I have to admit, she's vegan, so she's always experimenting with different things. Or she's plant based. She would tell me off if I said she's vegan, because she's not 100%. She just does what she can. And it's quite a mild taste, quite neutral. There is a taste to it, but nowhere near whey protein and that type of thing, or the whatever they put in protein powder. I was on a bean mixed protein thing, and for breakfast that just didn't sit right. It was just like, I always felt a bit bloated after it. So just trying this, and it works. It's nice. So try it. Sprinkle it everywhere, because as we may come to, protein super important as you get older.
I will absolutely. And you know what's funny about, I had forgotten about TVP until recently. So I am in this little village in one corner of Mexico.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of normal foods for, let's say, plant-based eaters around here. It's people here love their meat. I am plant-based myself, and I've been looking everywhere for like tofu.
Yeah.
And the one store here in Hidalgo does not have any kind of tofu, but found TVP.
Right.
Out of all things.
Okay.
So there's TVP at this little store out here in the Sierra Madres.
Handy. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to go to Morocco shortly, which again is going to be difficult to find this kind of thing, or we think it will be. Plenty of chickpeas and that type of thing, but we're going to be active. We need to be getting the protein. So in the luggage is going some dehydrated TVP that we can sprinkle in a tagine.
It doesn't take much space.
No, and you get quite a lot for the weight, and super high in protein. Protein for both for calorie and for
shelf stable, and
it's pretty good. Fan food, it's good.
And I know you're in between travels, Andy, but where are you today?
So in an area sort of known as the South Lake District. So there's a national park called the English Lake District, which is in northwest England, so just south of Scottish border, really. And it's a mountainous area that comes out onto the sea as well. Beautiful place. Very lucky to be here. So we're within an hour's drive. You can be in a remote valley, or as remote as it gets, or in a popular sport climbing destination. It's pretty well placed for different things.
Andy, for those of us who don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Andy McVittie, process physio, I suppose, is my tagline now. Lifelong climber since my teens, and I'm just about to turn 49, so quite a long time climbing now. Been coaching for I think about 16, 17 years or something like that now. Not so much nowadays. I've still got a few people that I work with. I used to coach teams, youth teams, that type of thing, and a full-time climbing physiotherapist, which I've been doing for the last 5 years now. And that was one of these opportunities that came and has grown, and I always thought it'd be nice to combine all these aspects together and bring my physio work into the climbing world, and you help friends and that kind of thing, obviously, as a physio who climbs, and never dreamed the climbing world would expand as it has and become something that would sustain a full-time climbing physio. So yeah, here I am, a very happy accident. It's lovely.
3 decades plus of climbing experience and outdoor experience, which you have now, brought to the fore with the work that you're doing with educating climbers and the general population about fitness, about injuries, about training. Thank you for your service. And I thought I would begin by asking you this question, which is, most people believe that aging means slowing down, losing strength, and ultimately giving up activities that they love. So you are here to challenge that. What is the biggest myth about aging and performance that you wish we could erase right now? I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
That's a good one. I think it would be quite a common theme. I get people coming to see me and they say, I felt I should come and see you now because I'm in my 30s. And I'm like, and what do you mean by that? And the aging process is starting. It's all downhill from here. I'm this, that, and the other. And genuinely surprised. I don't know if I was just very lucky or around positive people and that type of thing. But through my 30s, I never actually thought, oh no, I'm getting old now. Well, I had injuries and things, but nothing like that. And so it's this, and it comes from, you see it in the general media quite often when they're reporting on this kind of thing. And there are studies, population studies, that seem to show from the age of 30 you will start to lose muscle mass, you will start to lose function, you will start to a physical decline. And as with a lot of research, it's the interpretation of that. Yes, that does happen, and within this research it states it's linked to the aging process. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Are we talking biological process, that type of thing? And not really. It's just another way of saying we're getting older. Life is changing. Things are happening. And if you follow the general population, which most climbers won't fall into the category of the general population when I'm talking here, if you're looking at studies of hundreds of thousands of people, most of those won't be hitting their activity targets, the World Health Organization activity targets, that kind of thing. Climbers are desperate to climb. They keep making it happen no matter what happens to their lives. Most people, as they get older, and this is most people, obviously not the path that everybody follows, but may get a structured, responsible, more stressful job as they get into their 30s. They may buy a house and have a mortgage and responsibility. They may find a life partner and have children together and this type of thing. And all of these things are massive life changes that affect the amount of free time and energy that you have to put into yourself. And so we just lose opportunities. or we give of ourselves to other people and therefore lose opportunities. And so as you go through life, this is what happens. You're in your 40s, you've now maybe got a managerial role, so work's really taking it out of you, but you get a money compensation for that, but your kids are now teenagers, and life's pretty difficult. And on a Friday night, instead of going out and doing some activity, all you want to do is order a takeaway and have a bottle of wine and sit on the sofa because you're exhausted. And so we lose physical activity, and that is what the body responds to. The body is fantastically responsive. If you tell it you want it to get faster, stronger, fitter, it will do so. If you tell it, I want to sit on the sofa, it will adapt to allow you to sit on the sofa. Yeah, and that's it. So I think it's the fact that it's inevitable that we're going to start declining in our 30s is the biggie for me. And it's just not. We do know biological processes become, I'm going to choose my words carefully, less favourable when we're in maybe our 60s to mid 60s. Until then, for most people, it's going to likely to be about activity levels are dipping rather than an actual physical process that's happening.
When I was growing up overseas in India, there used to be this TV commercial with a famous Bollywood actor who was preaching these supplements, and they used to be called 30 plus.
Right.
And they used to, I think, target. I think the target was the over 30, I think, male.
Yeah.
Who was ostensibly declining and needed help. I will say personally that, well, I'm 46 now, but in my 30s, I think I felt, at least until my mid 30s, I felt strong as an ox, and I did not feel that. Maybe I might have had biomarkers which may have indicated otherwise. But based on a real feel, I felt quite healthy and capable and fit. So these studies that you quote, yes, maybe technically we are declining. We are past our prime, so to speak. But what is the way we should interpret them, right? Because if we just look at what the language is saying, it would mean, it would seem a little bit depressing, right? Also, and many of the athletes that I speak with, I interview, as well as people in popular media, they seem to find their peak later and later, maybe sometimes for some sports, even in their 50s. So help us interpret these studies in a way that is, let's say, more positive, and in a way that we can use to our advantage.
And this would not be actually, first of all, I was thinking as you were speaking, and you verbalized that really well, and it sort of hit with me about what it is that actually makes me a bit angry about the way it's put out there and how people respond to it, because it is that people feel this is inevitable, therefore there's no point in me doing anything about it. I'm not able to do that anymore because I've got a sore XYZ, whatever it might be. That's just part of getting old. That's how it is. I should stop doing that. My knee hurts when I run, or my ankle hurts when I run. Well, I'm in my 30s now. What do you expect? I won't be able to play soccer anymore. I won't be able to do this anymore. That's the narrative that comes out of it. And you can give a positive spin on it, absolutely. Spin is possibly the wrong word. There is a positive message within this research without criticising it, because it's good research, without being critical of it even. What it says is, if you allow your activity levels to decline, your body will decline. So the flip of that is, if you don't allow your activity levels to decline, then you won't decline. Now, aging is a process. It is happening every single day. I doesn't show up too much, but you know, the grey hairs are here, the wrinkles are there, that kind of thing. But we can do a lot to change the pace that aging takes place, if that makes sense. There's no magic thing, you know, that we can do that will stop aging, but we can certainly slow the pace down and keep going to a really good level for as long as we can. And yeah, you're quite right. For various reasons why people improve and peak and such like as they get older. Sometimes in some sports, particularly endurance, long endurance, you know, ultra runners and that type of thing, there seems to be some adaptations potentially that are going on there. Sometimes it's just experience in those kind of events of knowing what you can do, knowing where your limits are, knowing how hard you can push, knowing when to make a move. All that kind of thing can make people successful. Other times it's at that point in life they've gained more time, more freedom. Maybe they have taken early retirement, maybe their children have grown up and left home and are independent now, and they might be in their 50s at that point, but suddenly you've got space to train like an athlete. Yeah, and to recover and to think more about yourself and look at your nutrition and, you know, getting all the basics right and that kind of thing, and having a structured training plan instead of grabbing opportunities here and there where you can. So you do see a lot of people suddenly, yeah, can take a real lift. But the converse to this decline that goes on, and this inevitability of, oh, I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, this is what happens, this is, you know, there's no escaping it, I can't improve it. It's been shown in a lot of research that people in their 90s can make strength gains, that not just strength gains, but gains that make a functional difference to them. Now, when you're in your 90s, that potentially might be living on your own, as opposed to having to go into care or whatever it might be. You know, not necessarily training these 90-year-olds to be powerlifting and that kind of thing, but their bodies will respond at the age of 90 to strength training, and 80s. There's quite a lot of, you know, really older people have been looked at. The body will respond. It's never too late to start, even if you've been incredibly unhealthy your entire life and you're 80, and yeah, you can still do something, and you should.
Our ability, or, you know, the message about our ability to respond to exercise, movement, even sound practices with nutrition, and yeah, all of those, I feel like those should be put up on billboards everywhere.
Yeah.
Because too many people seem to fall into that narrative, into that, let's say, self-confirming, self-fulfilling prophecy that age is equal to decline. And maybe in this way, these studies, which I think are often done on large populations, not on motivated, athletically minded individuals, those studies often get interpreted the wrong way, because people look at those studies, and those studies, unfortunately these days across the West, you know, definitely in the US, where quite shockingly a lot of the indicators of the health of society are actually worsening when it comes to things like disease, when it comes to things like obesity, even lifespan and health span, they are shockingly going down. So if the everyday person was to look at these studies, they would kind of throw their hands up and say, hey, what's even the point?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what we're here to challenge.
Yeah.
Because you can read these studies in any way that suits you. And if you read those studies as in a self-confirming way that, hey, there's no point, you know, I might as well stop doing or keep slowing down.
Yeah.
And that becomes a confirmation thing.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, because you're seeing it in yourself and you're experiencing it, and so you think, well, this is what I was expecting. I've been expecting this since I was 30, and now it's here, and this is how it is. And I also think we're not too far removed with it. In so many ways, to be living in these times, incredibly fortunate. In so many ways, maybe not. That's a separate podcast. And I can remember my grandparents, and looking back at photos of those, that when they were in their 60s, there's photos from, like, say, from when my granddad retired at the age of 65, and he only lasted a few years after that because that was, the lifespan then. I look at him now, and I think that's not a guy in his 60s. That's a guy in his late 70s. He looked old. My grandma looked old. She was only in her early 60s. I've got friends way older than them that I'm still climbing with now. And so that generation is not so far off. That people really were old in their 60s. They really were struggling in their 60s. And so I think it takes a generation or two for that learned experience to wash out in some ways, and to become, we change the norm, I suppose. That's what we saw happening to our parents, grandparents. So that's what's going to happen to us. But yeah, we need to changing the narrative is really hard, isn't it? When it's what's the word? Not insidious. When it's throughout society, everybody sort of thinks that. So it's a really hard message to change.
A general question about longevity and what you have seen and learned over the years. So these days there are these tests people talk about, which seem to indicate one's lifespan, such as the grip strength test.
Yes. Okay.
Or
yes.
The ability to get off the floor without
no hands.
Using one hand.
Yeah.
Or even the ability to balance on one's leg, on one leg, for a certain length of time. And do you think, in your opinion, those are somewhat accurate predictors?
Again, general population, probably. I work with my mum on making sure she can get up off the floor, not necessarily with no hands. She wouldn't manage that nowadays. But that if she does fall, if she has a fall, then she can get up off the floor. And grip strength. Have I given my mum a hand gripper to do? No. No. It's not the action, it's not the thing. If you trained your grip but smoked 40 cigarettes a day and drank 2 bottles of wine and blah, blah, and that kind of thing, you might have quite a decent grip, but your lifespan is probably going to be affected by the other things that you're doing. A lot of the research on grip has been done in populations who are really quite unwell, in residential care. There's a word, cachexic, I knew I'd get that, cachexic population. So where they're really so systemically poorly that they're losing muscle no matter what is done, no matter what nutritional intervention is given, or no matter what, the late stage cancer, that type of thing. And so, it's really definite correlation, fall prediction even from it, because it can be a sign of just overall how robust you are. It's a pretty good one. I use it with climbers for them to test how well recovered they are prior to starting a climbing session. It has a lot of strong connections that are proven and pretty reliable. So as a broad, what we would call a sort of medically as a bedside test, these are the really useful broad brush tests. So if a doctor was visiting someone at home, and as part of, they could just give that a quick squeeze for me. It takes a few seconds. Yeah, but if they're squeezing that 8 kilograms, the doctor knows that that's a frail person. You know, we might need to take some interventions. Just very quickly, you might then, that result might open up further investigations. Yeah, to check kind of that information. It's not the task, it's what's behind the task. So, you know, by learning a sneaky skill trick way to get up off the floor with no hands, yes, it means you've got a certain level of strength and you've got certain levels of flexibility and such, right? But I know strong people who can't get up off the floor without their hands. They fall over.
Sure. Sorry, I'm having fun with this. Let's take out, certain exceptional conditions. You know, let's take out, like, you know, the
ill people, yeah.
The rock climber who's also a chain smoker.
All right,
let's take
okay.
that person out.
Yeah.
And let's also take out maybe some sneaky tricks or sneaky talents people have with balancing or getting off the floor,
Yes.
right? So let's even out those things. Are there really any other kinds of longevity tests or predictors that somebody who's listening to this right now can, jump up and try it? And this is not a trick question. If there aren't any really, then we can move on.
There may be, and these, not that I'm aware of, I would have to say, which doesn't mean obviously in any way that it's not out there. So it'd be cool to hear if somebody does. I kind of think if it was, we'd all be doing it. We'd all know about it, wouldn't we? That one would spread like wildfire if there was a thing that you could do. But this combination of grip test, which shows you've got some robustness about you, some strength about you, some muscle mass, balance, again, that's about control, probably related to muscle mass, but also related to not falling, which is a really big one. That type of thing. Yeah, getting up off the floor with flexibility, mobility, if we use that word. They're all combinations, aren't they? And I think if you would have to look at a person and look at that overall picture. It's not just about one little thing. But it'd be cool if somebody's listening to this and they do know one. I'd love, because I'm going to do it straight away. Although maybe I don't want to know.
Andy, yeah, for sure. No, they're not really any silver bullets with like predicting longevity. But okay, moving on. One interesting thing. So when we were exchanging messages before this podcast, one thing that you shared I thought was fascinating was it seems like your primary clientele, a bulk of it is, let's say, climbers. But you also mentioned that you now had started seeing parents of climbers, older folks perhaps, in their 70s and 80s, who are now coming to you. So yeah, I thought this was so cool. What are these people coming to you for? The parents, that is. And then what prompted these visits to come and seek your help?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting one. I think partly because I am in the physical therapy world, in the physio world, I would class myself as what's known as a movement optimist. That you could put yourself in different camps if you like. I try not to. I think every camp has something to contribute, but I really like that phrase. It's a guy, Greg Lehman, although he's actually a chiropractor, but fantastic researcher. Look him up. He's a great guy to learn from, and he's all about like what can we do? How do we get moving? How can we, rather than what can't we do? Let's take away from there. Let's calm things down if we're in pain and such like, but then we're going to build up. That's not where the rehab's done. We're going to build back up and beyond where we were before, and this type of thing. And I think I hope people from me get a general optimistic, positive message. I don't BS people. I don't tell people, you're going to definitely be able to do this if you can't, and that kind of thing. I will be real with people and tell them, this might be a hard road, this rehab's going to be difficult, but this is what we're going to do. We've got a plan. We're going to take it in stages, bite-sized chunks, that kind of thing. And I think it's just a collaborative, positive approach with people based around them and what they're wanting and what they're feeling. And so if they've had that positive experience, they can think, who else in my life that I care about would I like to see physically improved, I suppose. But as you were saying that before, I was also thinking, I did think, well, why? I hadn't really thought that through. What's bringing them? And there's a definite relationship between these high achieving athletes who are driven, often both in work or their passion and in climbing, and the kind of people. They're very modest, unassuming, but it's only once you get to know them you're like, whoa, you've done so much. You're like so impressive. Where do they get that from? Then you meet the parents. And you're like, oh, I can see why you're this kind of a person. So parents are actually pretty, it's like, one example, I'd like you to help my dad. He's in his 80s and he's not confident enough to ride his road bike anymore. And he used to enter like 24-hour races and break records and all this kind of stuff. So then I'm thinking like, oh, I can see where this link is coming, why you're the kind of person that you are. And it's that sort of relationship. They're that kind of people, I think, that will respond maybe to the way that I work. And I'm just, physiotherapy is all about being flexible and working in a way that clicks, that works with the person who's in front of you. And so they come with different viewpoints, different feelings, apprehensions, because normally one of the things I will do with them is get them in the gym. And that can be a totally alien space to them, but then there's ways, I'm not saying we just go straight and start deadlifting and that kind of thing, but to get them into that world, get their foot through that door, get them in. So why do they come? Because they want to keep going. They want to keep doing what they're doing. They want, longevity is fantastic, but if you spend the last 15 years of your life in chronic pain and disability and illness, I would suggest they don't count for as much as healthy, happy years. That sounds a bit harsh, maybe said out loud like that, but these people want to keep going, as long as they can. And and it's that really, and it's 5 or 6 times, I would say, in sort of the last 6 or 7 months that this has happened, all independent. These people don't know each other, if you know what I mean, but they're like, oh, my mum's got this issue, or my dad's got this issue, or could you see this person, and that kind of thing. So
sure,
it's cool. It's a very different patient population, but great to work with.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. The illustration helps, and for sure, you can have somebody who is a lifelong athlete suddenly gets older and gets hit by certain things, and they find that they're not as able, and perhaps they see their child get help from you, where they may not have even been aware that they could be helped, even with the issues they might have in the 80s, and come to you and sort of begin that road of change. Wondering if you had, let's say, another example of somebody who you might have seen who may not be a lifelong athlete, may not be this ex ultra cyclist, may just be an everyday person who sees their child come to you, and so I just use my example. My parents in the 70s, they are for the most part pretty healthy, but I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Mom, but I can see that my mom, she has maybe slowed down in some ways, right? She's been active but not an athlete. So if my mom was to be convinced to come to you, so and I'm wondering, we don't have to go to my mom, but if you've had somebody like that who's not been an athlete but comes to you, what kind of change, improvement, activity level rise can they hope for, and what have you been able to help them with?
So if somebody is coming for a health benefit, as opposed to a sporting benefit, then it is about activity. It is about engagement. It can be sometimes about directing somebody towards a social activity. It doesn't have to be, that gets that person out. We know all the benefits of social contact and that kind of, and it's this whole holistic approach. It's not, I would give, overhead dumbbell presses to every older person that comes through the door. It's speaking to that person. What do they want out of this? Well, that gentleman wanted to try and get back on his bike, but he actually came with his wife, who wasn't interested in that. She was wanting to feel more confident and robust and capable in herself, in her daily life. And so it's guidance can go, or the advice can go anywhere really. So for your mum, it might be that there's a specific task or something that she wants to do that she's now finding difficult, and so you can create a program that's geared towards that. So there's your motivation. Your mum's got buy-in now. She's like, oh, if I do this, I can go back to doing that which I really love, or that which I'm now struggling to do. And giving that back to people. I'd learned, all physiotherapists in the UK are trained by the National Health Service and spend time training, at least, if not working in the National Health Service. And so you do work with the general population. Before I became a sports physio, I was a neurological physiotherapist was my speciality, working with traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury and that kind of thing. And you see that gaining what to you might be an incredibly small thing can increase somebody's quality of life markedly. Being able to brush your own hair, being able to wash yourself, being able to, whatever it might be, can be around dignity rather than sporting performance. But just finding what that person wants. Why are they sat in front of you? What do they want? Once you've got that, it gets a lot easier. You start to get to picture then. It's a similar process to sporting physio, really. So many things have just principles, and if you follow the principles, all the technical side of things kind of falls into place. What does that person want? Why are they here? What resources have they got? Either the physical resources or their own resources to give to this. How long have we got to get there? What does the goal look like? And you work back from the goal.
Sure. Andy, I love that. That makes so much practical sense. Because if I was to go to my mom and tell her to start training for an ultra cycling event, or to plan a climbing trip to Chamonix, she would roll her eyes and move on. But not. But then, if I was to ask her about her confidence in being able to, let's say, pick up her grandkid, in the next decade, or to be able to pick up her bags and place them in the overhead bin on an aircraft, like day-to-day things that require strength, mobility, planning, all of that. I think my mom would definitely, like many others, would be very interested. So that is very, let's say, sanguine advice, which is outcome-based. Let's get back to talking about the aging athlete, which is the primary listener of this show.
Who all have parents.
So let's talk about who all have parents as well.
Yeah.
And who, I feel like athleticism is a spectrum. Some people might aspire to, again, 24-hour road races or soloing El Cap, but then on a day-to-day basis, we all aspire to some kind of activity and goal with our bodies, with ourselves. So let's talk about common age-related issues. So what are some of the most common physical challenges that you see in aging athletes, Andy? So, like things such as common things, right? Things such as, let's say, it could be arthritis, it could be tendon degeneration, it could be loss of power, or it could just simply be, let's say, loss or decline of energy. Like, what are some of those common things that you see with people who are getting older?
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe, you will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
All of those in one person in the presentation. You will have somebody come who might say, I've got, but that's normal. This is the thing. This is, again, you will have somebody who, let's take a climber who's been climbing for 40, 50 years. They're in their late 60s. Is their rotator cuff going to look like it did in their 20s? No, it will likely be what we would class it as a degenerative rotator cuff. Is their shoulder joint going to look the same as it did in their 20s? No, it will very likely have arthritis and all sorts of adaptive changes going on in there to do with having been an overhead athlete for 40, 50 years. Are they probably got less energy than they did when they were 20? Yes. Have they lost some power? Yes, and we can come on to the kind of the reasons for loss of power and that type of thing. But it's not going to be one thing. All of that is in there. So they say they come like, I've got sore fingers, I've got a sore shoulder. Sore shoulder's definitely very common in older climbers. You've got to, again, going back to before, it's this holistic point of view. There's no point in me just, that's not the shoulder. No, it's a shoulder with a problem, but that shoulder is attached to an individual. It's attached to a person. Their history is important. Their wants, their drive is important. Why they're here, what do they want to get? Is that realistic? We need to have that conversation sometimes. yeah, it's that full picture, and so you can't give the same exercises or the same prescription to one person as you would as the other, because you may have to consider, all right, we need to strengthen that shoulder in order to improve the symptoms that I feel are coming from it being arthritic. And we know that one of the best things you can do is to improve control and strength and robustness of a joint through muscular improvements. Could that impact the rotator cuff? Yes. So it would look possibly different for an older athlete than it would do for a younger athlete. I might work in different angles, for example. So rather than overhead, I probably wouldn't do this, but it's just an easy example. Pull-ups, yeah, a very overhead. We're not actually often in this plane of movement in climbing. We're most often out in front of us, and it can be very irritable for an older shoulder that's maybe lost a bit of range and there's some issues going on in there. So we work pull in front. It's still pull, yeah, it's actually arguably a bit more relevant as a climbing angle, that kind of thing. We might focus more on time under tension, which will stimulate muscles, but will also actually have an effect on tendons, a positive effect on tendons. Yeah, so, you know, common things that I see in older athletes is a bit of everything, I suppose, and maybe that's the decline. Maybe that's the, you know, that you've not just got one thing, you've got one thing with another, with another, with another. And then that gets complicated, doesn't it? You know, and that can feel a bit too much. That can feel a bigger hurdle to overcome, because we've not just got one thing, we've got all these other things attached with it. Yeah, but I suppose if we took an example, and a really common one, and I hear this all the time when I go to the climbing wall over winter, the climbing gym. There's a really fortunate in Kendal, got a fantastic, enormous climbing routes wall here. Really popular, fantastic to see when I go, which is often during the midweek rather than weekends. It's full of ageless athletes. Yeah, there's people in their 80s that are climbing. You know, we're like the youngest there. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Wow. Yeah, it's brilliant. But when you, I might be beelaying away, whatever, and I can hear the pair next to me, and they're just listing all the things that they can't do. The conversation is all around, oh yeah, well I've had to stop doing that now. I can't do this anymore, and I can't do that. And yeah, or have you heard about this and that? Yeah, and it's quite negative. And these are positive. These are the people that, you know, I guess in some ways, in, you know, for the health service and stuff, that we don't need to worry about. These are the people that are being active, that are being social, that are getting out there. Yeah, so goodness knows what the rest of people are saying. But the biggie is sore knees. That's the number one that starts and stops people from doing whatever it might be. So there's quite a big trad climbing area around here, got the mountains in the Lake District, so, you know, it tends to be quite a steep, high, long walk in, do your climbing, walk back out. On the walk back out, got really sore knees, yeah, take your ibuprofen and anti-inflammatories and that kind of thing. They'll manage it like that for a couple of years, and then eventually they'll just decide that's too sore. You know, I'm not enjoying that anymore, so I can only go to the crags that are more roadside, that type of thing, or yeah, I'm going to have to stop hiking, and, you know, and this kind of thing. And it just, the world gets smaller, and that's going back to people in their 30s and the 40s. What the problem was reducing opportunities to be active, and then the same happens. They're now no longer hiking for more than 20 minutes, so there goes some cardio. That's going to have an effect on their overall condition and fitness. Plus, you know, obviously if they were bothering to walk up a mountain to go trad climbing, that's obviously something that they love, and now they're not able to do that, and that's really sad. And the vast majority of the time, it's something along the lines of a patellar tendinopathy. It needs some focused strength work, working along time under tension, that kind of thing. Quite easy to address is the really frustrating, annoying thing. If you can find the right entry point and strengthen from there, it doesn't need any special equipment. You can probably just do it at home. Even some warming up techniques and things like that, which people never do for walk-ins. is a bugbear of mine, in that we will warm up so carefully for climbing, and then we'll spend Monday to Friday sat in an office, and then on Saturday morning we'll drive somewhere, get out, put a 15 kilo trad pack on your back, and then try and walk up a 45 degree side of a mountain, and then wonder why our knees are hurt. We just do it cold. We don't we never warm up. Yes, but the real frustration about it is that it's quite easy to sort out, but that person has lost so much.
Andy, that the knee, or the knee pain, and issues around being able to stay limber in all parts of one's body, not just the climbing appendages. That hits a little too close to home. So I will come back to that one a little bit later. But staying on the age related issues spectrum. So how can athletes, let's say, differentiate between normal aging changes, which may just require, let's say, observation and awareness, as compared to issues which require intervention? So curious, like, how do you look at those things?
But one of the questions I ask people when I first talk to them is, why are you here now? Because sometimes it's obvious. I popped a pulley 3 days ago, or whatever it might be. It's an obvious one. But for conditions like this, it's why now, and it's when things have got to a point that they're obviously feeling this is important enough or potentially serious enough that I need to spend time and money getting some advice on this. So it's reached that level, hasn't it, where it's like, important. How do you differentiate between something? Is probably incredibly subjective. There are many people in this area that I say that there's a real strong trad ethic. There are many strong independent trad climbers who have that kind of personality, where they're just getting on with it, and they don't grumble and they don't moan, and they will just drive on through. And I find them hard to hold on to. They will often admit defeat and come and see me for one appointment, and I'm often aware with that type of person and that type of personality that I've probably got this one intervention with them, and that's it. And then they're going to go back to being these strong-minded, independent kind of people. But even they've got to the point where they thought, right, this isn't normal. And so it's different for different people. I've seen people come in and they're like presenting with this, whatever it might be. I've got somebody in mind, which is why I'm pointed down to the knee, because it was about the knee. And I was like, how long has it been like this? How have you been managing with it like this in a physical job and still doing all the things that you? It's like, oh yeah, it's all right. And then other people will come in with what to that person would seem an incredibly minor issue, but it's all very subjective to that person, what their comfort limits are. Not about pain thresholds and things like that. I mean that as in how much it's affecting their life and their quality of life, how much they're worried about it, that type of thing, and how much confidence they have in themselves that they will be okay, that they'll bounce back from it. I mean, I would obviously say, if you're ever in any doubt, get it checked, by a professional, somebody that you trust. Recommendations are fantastic. If somebody can say go and see such and such, because what can happen, it's obviously way easier to deal with something early than it is late. Taking a tendinopathy as an example, much easier. If somebody comes and it's a little, it's a reactive tendinopathy that's a little bit sore, we can twiddle about with the volume and such like that they're doing with the climbing, make some adaptations there, couple of interventions exercise wise, 90% of people, job done, all good. But if somebody walks in the treatment room and they're like this, because they're unable to straighten any of their arm because the tendons are so painful, then we know we're in for a long rehab journey. So yeah, get things checked out early. But the main thing, I went off on a slight tangent there, is that these things creep up often over quite a time. Somebody might have a sore knee. We keep coming back to knees, but it's just an easy example. And it bothers them a small amount of the time, and then in a year's time it's starting to bother them a bit more. But that becomes the norm. That becomes what you're now used to and what your daily life is. And there's a strange thing, I see a pattern I see quite often with humans, obviously, this is me now, this is the norm, and you almost don't realise. And then next year it's 1% worse, and then next year it's 1% worse, and and it's just getting gradually, slowly worse until somebody realises, like, I can hardly do anything with my leg. And it's almost like it's crept up on them. And that's a really common thing I see. So I guess the message, and not just because I'm trying to get more people to go and see physiotherapists or what have you, but yeah, get things checked out early. I spend far more time, maybe not more time, but I spend more time than people might realise telling people it's okay. And we can look at this, that and the other and what have you, but this is going to be okay, and you probably actually only just need this one appointment with me and it will be all right. And the relief that you see for most of them, they're just like, oh, thank goodness, I thought it was going to be whatever. So if you're not sure, get in early, get it checked.
Yeah, if you can, if you're smart enough, and we have people in our community, or we have people in our next of kin, whether they be parents or kids, who can be that voice of reason and encouragement.
Yeah. And then
when we
I was just going to say, one of the best ways to persuade somebody to do something who might be hesitant about whatever it might be around healthcare, is to say to them, if this was the other way round, would you be telling me to go and get checked out because I'm worried about you? And then they go, yeah, I would. Okay,
I like it.
Right, yeah, fair enough. Because humans, we will pester our loved ones to go and get help with whatever it might be, not even a health issue. We'll be like, yeah, go get that sorted out, I'll try and help you solve this problem, I'll drive you to the appointment, I'll do anything. It's like, right, now you need to look after yourself. No, I don't need an appointment. No, I'm okay. No, I'll be all right. And it's a strange thing with humans, isn't it? We will put everyone else first, or often people will put everyone else first before themselves. So yeah, spin it round on them. Yeah. Sorry, go on, you were about to say.
Andy, I thought I would ask you, and maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into these interventions. And in my, let's say, layman's point of view, I think of interventions fall into the spectrum, and using again that illustration with somebody's knee, because the knee thing is so common with aging. When you, let's say, you're smart enough to seek help when one's knees first start bothering us, because we can't take that long hike, walk, run anymore with pain. We come and seek physiotherapy advice, and hopefully we can regain that function, that endurance. So I call it, in my mind, I call it like, let's say, first phase, first step. The second step could be where that person has been doing that physiotherapy with some degree of success, but that pain is not going away, and that hike up a talus field to go climbing or running or whatever, that is still that's now starting to cause more and more pain. So maybe the second step is when the person starts thinking more radically and maybe start seeking let's say more new agey interventions. It could be things like getting a PRP injection. It could be maybe even things such as I don't know, red light therapy or stem cell therapy. So one goes and explores all of those. Again, I recognize that these are not available to everybody. But let's say for the privileged few who can go and explore those things, you go and do those things. At some point, one exhausts those because I think a lot of these are unproven in their efficacy over time. And one comes to a certain point, and one is advised, hey, your knee is essentially done. You have no more cartilage left or whatnot. At this point, you need that joint to be replaced. And again, I'm a layperson, but that could maybe apply to even other joints. It could be
shoulder.
The shoulder that you spoke of. It could also be hips and ankles. So absolutely. So I find that one also gets differing advice based on different types of medical practitioners, or even going to let's say yoga teachers, right? Like the people basically we turn to, the experts.
They will recommend yoga. A surgeon will recommend surgery, and a physio will recommend physio.
In your experience, maybe we can do it any way you like. We can either go start like top level, or we could maybe go joint by joint and think about what are some of the most common issues that people bring to you. And in that spectrum, in that, let's say that menu book of interventions, what do you recommend at what phase?
Right. So if we can go to the knee, just because that's kind of what we're talking about. But I think this would apply just as much to the shoulder and the hip. These are joints that are, I was going to say, easily replaceable. That sounds, it's a major procedure, but it's a common procedure. It's well known, well practiced. It's something that has a high success rate. So if it has got to that point, now if they've been with me from the start, there's a phrase that's often used of particularly I'd see American physical therapists complaining about it, that the patient has failed physical therapy and therefore is a candidate for surgery. And physical therapy may never have been able to fully cure the issue that was within that joint, but I would certainly hope that after, say, 8 or 12 weeks of being under a physical therapist, it's now in a much better condition to have a successful outcome for the surgery. Because we know if the stronger you get a joint before surgery, the better the outcome will be afterwards. So it's not the case of failing physical therapy, but it's a very joint decision. Again, I would never say to somebody, you need to go and get that joint replaced. That's a decision for them to come to, depending on so many variables within their life. Sometimes it's just not the right time, as in they've got other draws on, whatever it might be. They can't afford to take the 6 weeks recovery period or whatever it might be. Yeah, and it's a decision between the consultant, the surgeon, between the patient, myself involved in there, and then whoever else is important to that patient all goes into it. It's very rare that it's a true black and white type incident, where it's like, yep, it's absolute must. Certainly surgeons are qualified to and will say, I'd strongly recommend that you have this surgery. All of that aside, and there's different procedures, there's different, within that there's complete joint replacements, there's partials, there's shoulder reversals, there's all sorts of things obviously that go on within a surgery, and so there's all those decisions to be made as well. If all that looks good, that decision's made, it seems like the positive choice to make and that kind of thing. My view on joint replacements is basically like, yeah, because they're just, even back when they were first started to be used, they felt they would probably have about a 10-year lifespan. This is particularly for knees and hips, and so the person should wait as long as possible, because because it was only going to last 10 years, and they didn't know whether they'd be able to do another one, a secondary one after that. Once they'd realised that those ones that they thought were going to last maybe 10 years were still going after 25 years, they started to think, right, okay, and now we're feeling, get it done. This is resources dependent. Get it done as soon as you can. Not just saying, get a twinge in your knee and like, oh, I might as well get this done now. But if that's the decision that's going to be made, rather than waiting for it to get incredibly painful and this, that, and the other, if you're able to, then get it done early, because the recovery, the functional, what you're left with after is a perfectly functional joint. And there's tons of climbers out there that have had 1-2 hips done, 1-2 knees done, shoulders done, and still climbing well, climbing hard. So it's not something to shy away from, and it definitely, for the majority, doesn't mean an end or even a huge reduction in what you're able to do.
Andy, it was funny, when you were talking about, let's say, aging climbers who now have limited their choice of crags that they can go climbing at, and more and more they're opting to go for, let's say, those roadside crags or drive side crags. And it's so funny, I'm a case in point. So I have bad knees, right? I have early arthritis in my knees, because I believe this is conjecture to a large degree, but because I have had structurally poor alignment, because I was born with slight knock knees and also flat feet. So basically I have felt that loss of availability, that autonomy over the last few decades. So it went from, let's say, not being able to run and play tennis maybe 15 years ago, to the point of today where I am in Puerto Rico in Mexico, and I find that the days that I elect to go for those further away crags with more challenging approaches, those days create stress and anxiety, and also they cause that pain and soreness end of day, right? At the same time, I am also a believer, perhaps like you and others in your field, that discipline and hard work can correct or maybe address many of these things. So I'm sure if I was to follow some of maybe the exercises and the programs, they would help address some of these things. At the same time, I also hear this advice where in some cases it is better to get those replacement surgeries earlier than later. So whether it is my shoulder, which has issues, or my knees or my hips. So I hear sometimes what feels like conflicting advice. So I'm personally motivated to avoid this trauma of losing my natural joints, and I'm motivated to put in the work. At the same time, I also hear that, well, if one is going to get those things done, then one should get those elective procedures done earlier. So what is somebody who is in this situation, what do you see, what do you advise?
And this is, your case is a really good example of what I was saying. Is it's very rarely a yes or a no. You've obviously been thinking a while, discussions going on a while, finding out information, speaking with different people who've had it done, gathering it, and this is, and we should, because although I would say before, it's a common procedure, it's still major surgery. It's still, a thing that we really need to think carefully about. For yourself, you have I'm hearing you have a preference for keeping the autonomy, keeping strong, keeping robust, working against going down that line. And if you find the right way for that, then that might solve it, and therefore no need. If it truly is something that has a biomechanical element to it that cannot be overcome through corrective exercise. So corrective is a terrible word, sorry, because what I wouldn't be trying to do is correct the angle of your knees or try and make things move in different. We would just try and make your whole lower body more robust, so it can spread the load, so it can take and build capacity of what you're wanting to do. It may be, if we're unable to stop that process, that the decision is made for you. It's very few people who come and say, I would like surgery, please. Well, they'd be speaking to the wrong person for starters. But if they say, I would like surgery because my knee hurt yesterday twice when I was walking down the stairs. It gets to a point, doesn't it, where it's affecting things so badly that the choice is made for you. Nobody voluntarily goes, I'll tell you what, I'll get mine done at 30 and then they're not going to bother me when I'm 40 or 50. There's no problems with my knees. I'll just get them done now. Save doing it later. The decision, it sounds like you are quite focused, quite determined. Things are not affected too badly yet, and you're feeling that you can keep going as you are and hopefully keep improving and such like. But it may just come to a point where it's like, right, that's not working anymore.
Yeah, I guess you make a good point that
point at different times.
That you come to a certain point where the decision is made for oneself on getting that medical intervention in place. And what is your opinion, Andy, on some of these other, let's say midway interventions? The one that I mentioned. Have you found that people who have elected for like the PRPs or the stem cells, etc., for these issues, seen long-term benefits?
There's some interesting things that I mentioned earlier. Today's been an admin day for me. There's been a couple of papers that I wanted to look at as well today, which I've looked at. One of them, funnily enough, was on rotator cuff and comparison between corticosteroid and PRP. And it seemed to be showing that in the long term, 12-month plus, that type of thing, PRP was more effective than corticosteroid. I'm going to instantly put a rider on that and say, is corticosteroid the appropriate thing to be doing for this particular rotator cuff type issue in the first place? So maybe we're just comparing two things that potentially but aren't, the first line of intervention anyway. But yeah, there is some conflicting evidence around PRP, various interventions that all seem to be the answer, have some quite compelling, logical, you can look at it and think, oh right, so this acts on that's part of this, so that must mean that this happens. And often these jumps are made that if you put stem cells in there, then they're going to make new cartilage. I don't know, but that, I once had a collagen researcher say to me, would you ask a bald man to eat hair if they wanted to grow hair? And just because you're ingesting collagen into your stomach, this is literally what he said. I wasn't looking at you when I said that. That doesn't mean the process means that collagen finds its way into that tendon in the knee and makes it magically better, because kind of who knows what sort of happens, and we don't know regarding that. And there's just so many things in science that we look at. We think this could be the next big thing. It can take 10 to 20 years for us to start, isn't it? Shockwave therapy was quite a big one for was going to be the cure all for tendinopathies, and I love working with tendons, so that's have I bought a shockwave machine? No. It seems it can potentially be effective for very specific types of tendinopathy that I don't see that often because it's lower limb type stuff, if other things haven't worked, and what's the difference between shockwave and ultrasound, which therapeutic ultrasound we don't really do now in the UK. It still has a couple of potential uses around if we've got a lot of edema, a soggy joint, and we want to try and help clear that out. But that makes very logical sense when you see what ultrasound does, and it can apparently pass through layers and stimulate these individual, the cells that we want to get some energy into and stimulate them and that kind of thing, which is similar to what shockwave's doing really, but shockwave's like ultrasound turned up to 11. Or are they just fantastic placebos? and a lot of the time, I think this is why I do fall back onto exercise. I'm definitely an exercise biased physiotherapist over manual therapy, anything else. That I will happily say to people, if something makes something feel nice and it has no other side effects and isn't costing you a fortune, then by all means go and do it, but that's not likely to be the cure. That's just likely to be something that makes it feel nice. But if you've got something that's painful and sore and you're not able to use it, but you whack it with a massage gun and it feels like, well, that can be priceless. If you then get a good night's sleep, which helps you recover and helps it heal and that kind of thing. So yes, I think you're quite right to be skeptical about a lot of claims that are made about a lot of things that are in between this lifestyle changes and exercise and surgery.
Yeah, I think I'm a healthy skeptic with most things.
Yeah,
except
skeptic.
except that when it comes to situations when I feel it's going to offer me some promising cure, then I think tend to be a risk taker. So to illustrate,
Yeah.
I underwent a PRP procedure for my left shoulder. With the most negative results. I experienced. So this was last year, about a year ago. I experienced, the worst pain episode that I've ever had,
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear
and
that.
had a prolonged period of pain, debility, and loss of motion. But again, that's just me. I put in some more time on just getting anecdotal information. It seems like the I think going back to what you said about not having enough research data or the length of research data on, it seems that the outcomes on PRP for the shoulder are not proven to be effective long term, and maybe the shoulder is a weird joint, the way the capsularity is. So I'm curious if you have any information on the effectiveness of PRP or similar interventions for different joints, because again, what I'm hearing is that perhaps PRP and stem cells are more effective for certain things versus other things. And I recognize that, yes, from your medical practitioner's point of view, yes, we don't have enough data. And yes, just like you, myself, and maybe many people listening have a bias for exercise. But if they want to supplement that exercise with an intervention such as this, if there is a particular joint where it's been known to be more effective, and you can say, Andy, hey, you know what, I don't have information because there isn't any out there.
I don't have any information, but that doesn't mean that there isn't any out there. It just means that I haven't spent the time looking, but I'm going to. I'll get back to you. I think it's a really interesting. Now, definitely for different conditions, it can be. Like when PRP first came around, and now, goodness, I'm going to think back. This must be at least 20 odd years ago, I think. And a friend of mine had it for an Achilles tendinopathy. He was a triathlete, and it was like this wonder thing, and I hadn't even heard of it. I was like, wow, what's that, man? And they're going to take my blood and they're going to spin it, and they're going to and I was like, oh god, this is like Star Trek kind of stuff. This is amazing. And he was having it because he had his big race for the year was coming up, and he couldn't shake off this Achilles tendinopathy. It's like Ironman distance, that kind of thing. And he had it. He told me at the time, and would still tell me today, that got him through that race, and that cured it, and that really, really made it feel better. And then I know people that have had both PRP and corticosteroid injections that will tell you both. That was absolutely fantastic. My mum had a case of tennis elbow, degenerative tendon. She's in her 80s. Yeah, tennis elbow, which tennis elbow came from her exercise class. Which is at least she was doing exercise. This is good. She's great. And the doctor was able to give corticosteroid injections. And in that appointment, when she went, she didn't ring me, by the way, and say, "Hello, son, qualified physiotherapist. I've got tennis elbow." Doctor looked at it, diagnosed it, gave it an injection, and that's like not the thing to do for a tennis elbow anyway, into a tendon or around a tendon. It affects tendons negatively, and onto a degenerative tendon of a woman in her 80s. And I managed to go, "Oh, that's interesting, Mum." And what do you think about it? She said, "Oh, it's wonderful." She said, "I'm back cooking, cleaning, picking up the kettle, doing all the other stuff that she does. It's like magic." So, I kept my mouth shut. She won't listen to this. That's fine. Everything that I'm aware of said that shot shouldn't have probably been given and shouldn't have had a positive effect, but it did. So now we're in possible realms of placebo and this, that, and the other, and how powerful that is, and that type of thing, which it is. I don't know, but I think it would be interesting, to have a look, see if there's any literature out there, or I can ask around. Actually, we've got a nice little group of the climbing physiotherapy world is still quite a small one, but there's also quite a lot of us, and I've got a group together now from Australia, Canada, America, Sweden, all over, and we have like a monthly Teams, Zoom, whatever meeting. We've got a Discord group going on where we're all chatting and asking, and what's the news.
Andy, that would be phenomenal. And one thing which is, which is comprehensive about a complex lifestyle sport like climbing is that it goes way beyond one's ability to, let's say, produce power on a rock climbing face. It goes to everything, it goes, like we're talking about, it goes to one's ability to begin with, being able to simply don a backpack and walk out the door or walk to the crag, to being able
that
to
action.
Exactly, right? Like so Andy was demonstrating, if you're not watching this on video, is simply being able to put one's backpack on. And again, I mean, I use myself as an example again. Because of my bad left shoulder, I have now developed this this annoying habit of always putting my backpack on the right side. And it's funny, I use this Patagonia backpack which has a waist strap, and I am challenged with being able to extricate the left waist strap from the left side once I put the backpack on. So it's all these tiny but significant movement adaptations we make in some of these outdoor lifestyle sports, which would benefit from your collective body of knowledge and wisdom. Because honestly, this is why I started this podcast at the crux of it, because a lot of us, let's say aging athletes, sometimes have no other source of information to go to interrogate other than others like us. So that would be super helpful.
No, definitely. And it is, both, like with the research before where we were saying it can give a negative story or it can give a positive story depending on how you look at it, and your ability to keep working around that deficiency in your shoulder is what's so fantastic about humans, how adaptive we are, how we've actually generally we've got an awful lot more capacity and function than we actually need. So when you see older climbers with fingers like this, they've lost all this range and they look like horrendous whatever, and yet they can still climb, they can still dress themselves, they can still eat. These are still perfectly functional fingers because we've got kind of more range than we need to do most things. When somebody has a shoulder reversal operation, you very rarely you won't be able to get back to these ranges. It's just not physically possible anymore. Can they still climb? Absolutely. The body will adapt, but it's when it adapts in a negative way, isn't it? And this is what I was saying about things become smaller and smaller. Things like people reaching into the chalk bag at the back. They can't chalk up their left hand on a climb anymore. This kind of thing. That's one that I see quite often. So they get shoulder pain at the front, and they're trying to think of some way they can adapt around it. And I've had people climbing with 2 chalk bags so they can dip at the front, and so we adapt around these things potentially, rather than maybe we should do something about that. rather than just working round it. Yeah, because that's when things get smaller and smaller. Yeah, because we're
Andy,
taking away choices.
Yeah, and it's funny, your observations are so profound and on point. It's almost, yeah, it almost makes me wonder whether you are flying a little drone above me as I'm climbing, or even doing my daily functions, because you know exactly what people like myself are encountering when we have, let's say, loss of function with different joints. Andy, moving on, one thing I would like to do, I know we are almost at the end of this this session, is I would love for you to help us learn about some tactical approaches on being able to combat some of these specific things. This loss of function, and maybe some common things that people can take away and start doing right away, with, let's say, being able to strengthen their knees, regain dorsiflexion with their ankles, being able to get more range of motion out of our shoulders. And I would love it if maybe in our next session, if we could actually go through these common ones one by one. And I know that, again, people, and I would encourage people to look you up directly and avail of your personal services, as depending on your availability and and time. But as what we can do over video and over this podcast, on educating us on some things people can start doing immediately.
And it's going to be my go-to answer for most things, which is get strong.
100%. We want to get stronger.
But we want some specifics. So if we look at the knee, as you were saying, what do we do there? If somebody's noticing they're starting to get pain when they're walking down the hill at the end of the day, what can they do? That it can be made incredibly complicated with movement screening, and is it your glute med or your glute min? Is it is it this? Is it that? And we can go down that line if we want, but the general advice to most people it's to make that leg strong, and rather than just thinking about the knee, we have to think about that knee is attached to the shin, which is attached to the ankle and the foot, which is attached to the thigh, which is attached to the hip. So there's no point just making the knee strong. We need to make the whole unit strong, and that works in two ways. One is that if everything else gets a bit stronger, it offloads the knee a bit more. But if we make the knee stronger, obviously it's also able to deal with a bit more. So you combine those two together, and you've got much more powerful. So I tend to go for full leg exercises, and super easy, it's just a wall sit. There are so many, that way you stand against a wall, slide down until your knees are at about 90 degrees, and then stay there until your legs turn to jelly and you fall over. It's a really high level, hard exercise. If you want to make that with calves involved, go down into that position and just lift your heels off the floor. Everything will be shaking within about 30 seconds. If that's too easy, go to a single leg. If going from two legs to one leg is too much of a jump, just put a chair there and take a little bit of hand support in one leg, that kind of thing. There's searching for perfection will stop us doing an awful lot of things. So as I said before, sink down to 90 degrees, which is just it's a rough. For some people that will be a painful range. Actually 90 degrees is probably the most painful range. That's probably bad advice. Sink down to before 90 degrees. If for you need to be at 120 degrees to be pain free, work there. That's fine. A common one I get is people who bench press and they've got shoulder issues, and they'd say it hurts at the bottom of a bench press, so I've stopped bench pressing. And I'm like, well, why have you stopped? Why don't you just go down to, a few centimetres below the bottom? You can get blocks that you can actually attach to the bar, a foam block that will actually stop you. They're a few pounds off Amazon. You can put a
or you
book
can
on
keep
your
a
chest.
rolled up towel on
so
your
it keeps
chest.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever, just to stay, you're still getting, if you're able to do 90% of the range, you're still getting, for argument's sake, 90% of the benefit of the exercise. By not doing the exercise, you're getting no percent of the benefit of that exercise. You just stopped. So to go back to this wall sit, adapt it to how it works for you, but that makes your leg work hard. And then I would move into something like a lunge. And by that I don't mean a move, where you take a big stride forwards and hit the ground and it's very dynamic. I mean that way you take a small step forwards and then you actually lower yourself down, thinking about the knee of your back leg touching down to the floor, and then raising back up. A real movement that integrates everything. We've got balance going on there, but not so much of a balance challenge that it's not a strength exercise. If you've not got equipment, I bet you've got a rucksack. I bet you've got some climbing kit. Yeah, load your rucksack up, put that on your back, and then do some lunges. To make that harder, you can do a rear foot elevated split squat, is its catchy title, which is basically the same movement, but just put your back foot on a chair, and it really then starts to work that front leg much more. Again, if you find that sinking down low causes pain and discomfort, just don't go to that bit yet. But if you stick with it and give it some consistency, I would hope for the majority of people, certain cases aside, that you will be able to gain extra range as you increase your strength in that area just outside the painful range. That increased capacity and strength and control sort of bleeds into the painful range, or what was the painful range, and then you'll find you're able to make those few extra degrees, and you start making progress.
Andy, I love all of this, and I absolutely feel that listeners are going to have some questions about
how to describe exercises,
subtleties, and maybe adaptation they should make. And if you're okay with it, maybe we can pick up on those in our next session.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll stop recording for now.
Okay.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself, keep pushing those limits, stay mentally and physically fit, Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.